Hey guys, welcome back to One House Pub. Alright, it's time for me to do my video for my new Hinderer. I've actually tried multiple times to film this over the last week and a half, and even got one done, uploaded it, and was just getting ready to go through and do the editing and whatnot. And then lo and behold, my buddy Rob over at the Apostle P uploads his and gets his out first. And so then after watching his, now I feel the need to reshoot mine, within the context of his video and whatnot. So here I am trying. I think this is probably my 7th try at this video for whatever reason. And I tell you, the thing is, it's not just that I'm like keep messing the video up or that because Rob's now got his out, that there's something else I have to say or whatever. It's really just that I have, for whatever reason, have a difficult time doing a Hinderer review. You know, me and the XM-18 have kind of a long history. It's the knife that kind of got me over the edge, put me. It was that next level knife. It was the one the first time I saw it, I laid eyes on it, and it was just like the clouds parted and the sun shone down on me, and it was just glorious. And I was like, oh wow, I gotta have one of those. And then I found out what they cost, and I was like, oh no, I'm not going to have one of those. But over the course of time, I thought about it and rationalized it and went through a lot of planning and scheming and whatnot. What could I sell, and what all this and what all that. At the time, I was really into paramilitary 2s when I first laid eyes on the XM, and I had a bunch of those, so I ended up selling off a bunch of those. It's fun purchasing my first Spanto, which I bought, and then after I owned that, then I had the good fortune to be at a show and have the chance to buy a lottery knife for the table price, which is considerable discount on what I paid on my first one. So after I got that knife then, which was also Spanto, then I sold the first one, but then thought, well, and I ended up buying and selling a bunch of knives over the course of the next couple, 2-3 years or whatever it's been now that I've really been into the XM-18. And in the process of doing that, I have owned multiple copies of this knife. I've had Spantos, I've had slicers, I've had Warncliffs, multiples of each. I've had 3.5, which this is. I had 1 3-inch. I've never had an XM-24, and now I have, as you can see from this, and from the name on the video, the Skinner, which is one of the newer grinds. Was the newest grind until just a couple weeks ago when the Bowie Hinderer's really newest grind came out here for the XM. But when this came out in 2014, and when I saw this one, I was like, wow, I really would like to get that. But in 2014, I had thinned out my Hinderer collection significantly. I've owned as many as 5 at one time, which was a little shameful, frankly. Don't need 5 XM-18s, and I've probably owned, over the course of the time that I've owned them, I've probably owned 12 or 13 of them. Just buying and selling and trying to come up with the one that I wanted, and I pared it down to where I just had one. I had just that classic old Spanto, 3rd gen Spanto, that you've seen on this channel a lot. It's been in various different guises with different color scales and whatnot, but if you look back in my channel, you'll see a lot of XM-18s and several videos on Hinderers and whatnot. All of those are gone now, and except for that Spanto was the last one that I just kept. It was kind of the one I was going to ride off into the sunset with. It was going to be my Hinderer of choice until this thing came along, the Skinner, and then I decided I really kind of wanted one of those instead because I really love the blade shape on this guy. But I knew the Spanto had to go. So in order to do that, I went ahead and decided I'd have to sell the Spanto. Now, I didn't sell the Spanto and then go buy this. I wanted to be sure that I wanted this. So instead, I bought this and then made sure it was what I wanted, and then went ahead and sold the Spanto. And it is gone, and I do miss it in many ways. It was a great knife, and I had it the longest of any of the Hinderers that I'd owned, and really did think it was going to be the. I swore I'd never sell it, and then ended up doing it. But one of the things I really dug about this one, aside from the obviously from the Skinner grind, is the backside. The lock side on this guy is sandblasted as opposed to your typical stonewashed, which is what Hinderer usually puts on their knives. Typically, if you see a knife that's got a finish other than stonewashing, whether it's a sandblasting or a working finish or a bead blast or whatever, usually, not always, but I'd say usually, in my experience, that means it's probably been a show knife, was made specifically for blade or shot or New York Custom Knife Show or, whatever. And I believe, I don't remember what show it was that I think that when I first bought this, there's a show that was just out, and I don't remember what it is. Bert, maybe I'll have you do a little research for me there. But at any rate, when I bought this, it had brass standoffs in it. That when I bought it, it has bronze. Now I put some bronze anode titanium standoffs in it, but it came with brass ones, and of course it just had the regular sandblasted clip. This is a bronze anode stonewashed clip that in filler tab that I just happened to have sitting around, which I put in because I thought it went perfectly with the standoffs and the flat dark earth scale, which also goes perfectly with the logos. I know some people don't like the logos, but the logo, I actually do. I kind of prefer them. I've had both sterile and logoed knives, and I just kind of like the logos. I just always have, for whatever reason. But I like gaudy decals on cars too, so I guess I'm consistent. Anyway, back to this knife being a show knife. It came with brass standoffs, and at the time I got this, there were several other knives out, not necessarily all Skinners, but just other XM-18 3.5s that were being sold, on Blade Farms or the USN, that were exactly the same. They were sandblasted lock sides with brass standoffs, and excuse me, and they were being advertised as knives from whatever such and such show. Again, I don't recall. This one specifically wasn't advertised that way, but I really suspect that it was indeed a show knife. And the box that it came in has the numeral 1 written on it, so I suspect they were labeling these knives, and this was probably the number 1 knife or whatever in the list that they'd set out to display. So I don't know, that's kind of supposition, but that's my guess. Anyway, I really dug the sandblasting because all but one of all the XMs that I've owned have been stonewashed, and I love Hinderer stonewash, don't get me wrong, but I just kind of wanted something different. And when I saw this one with the sandblasted lock side, I was like, wow, that's something cool. The only other one I'd ever had that wasn't stonewashed was also sandblasted, and it was blue anode. It was an early Gen 4 Sands logos, and was in Duratec 20CV, and was also a Spanto, and that was a really nice knife too. At the time, the blue just wasn't working for me, so I didn't end up keeping it, but I regretted selling it, like I always do. Almost every knife that I ever sell, sooner or later I go, man, why did I sell that? Anyway, and I actually saw that blue Spanto come up about 6-8 months ago on the forums for sale again, and I knew it was mine because I could tell, because it was fairly well used, and had pretty good snail trails and on the lock side, and was pretty well recognizable. I had pictures of mine, and I could tell. I looked at the old pictures I had, and I looked at the one online, and there's just telltale marks. Yeah, that's definitely my knife. Man, it was all I could do not to buy it. I was trying to talk myself into it, and before I could, somebody else stepped up and took it. But that actually is what kind of then set me. Those Skinners were coming out about that same time, and that's what kind of set my mind thinking, well, if I was going to get that blue Spanto back, that meant I'd have to get rid of my Gen 3 Spanto, because I'm really trying to only have one. And when I didn't get that, I thought, okay, I'll keep the Gen 3, but gosh, maybe I should get rid of the Gen 3 and get a Skinner. You can imagine this conversation. Knife nuts, you guys know how this inner monologue goes as you're trying to decide what to do and what to get rid of to fund your next purchase. At any rate, I picked this one up with the sandblasted lock side just because it was different, and because frankly, I just really dig sandblasted titanium anymore. Blame it on this knife, but the Sebenza, it's just got such a cool tactility to it. It's just got such a great feel. It looks awesome, and I love the, I actually like the wear marks that you get on these things, kind of Boba Fetting them out. And this one does have some of those too, if you'll note. You can kind of see them there in the butt, if I can get the focus. If you can see them or not. Got some pretty good, there we go. There you go. So, it has seen some pocket time and has been beat up a little bit, but that's all right. That's what they're for. But anyway, and I kind of like those character marks that they get. But anyway, it was these, the sandblasted titanium that you find on the Sebenza that I enjoy so much on the Sebenza, and opportunity to get that look and feel on an XM was just seemed like the right thing to do. So went ahead and snagged it, and like I said, with the Skinner grind and that blasted lock face, it's just a very unique knife. Let me get the bear out of the way, give me a little bit more room here. It's just a very unique knife, a very unique XM-18. You just don't see a ton of them like this out there. Let's talk about the knife itself. Other than the blade shape, it's typical, and the lock side being not stonewashed. It's pretty typical XM-18 fare. It's a flipper. I'm sure you guys, if you've watched this video, you probably already watched Rob's over at the Apostle P's video where he did the flipper delete. And I got to be honest, when he sent me text messages telling me he was doing that, I was calling him a heretic and shunning the non-believer and going through everything just to give him a hard time. But you do got to admit, he did a heck of a nice job, and it really came out well. His looks factory, just incredibly good job on it. That said, I'm not going to be doing that to mine. I don't have a lot of flippers anymore, really, other than a couple of Kershaw, which are also Hinderer designs. I got the Cryo 2 and the Thermite assisted flippers, and my Southern, I guess. Those are really the only flippers in this, or the only flippers I have now. I'm not really that much into flippers anymore. I used to be much more so, but again, I think the company I keep, my association with Mr. Bixby over at the Apostle P channel is starting to rub off on me, and the logic of just good, useful thumb studs is starting to rub off on me, among other things. But XM-18, I'm going to keep my flipper on it. I have no intention of grinding that sucker off of there. Anyway, so back to the knife itself. It's standard fare, XM otherwise, flipper, dual thumb lugs, thumb studs that are really just blade stops. They also operate as thumb studs as well, but they're blade stops, and give this knife its wonderful lockup. No side to side, no up and down. And the grind itself is relatively high here. The Spanto was more of a true saber ground down here until I got to the end where you had this Tonto spear point kind of combo thing going on. But this is a little higher grind, so it allows a little less of an abrupt taper as you come to this extremely thin behind the edge. Okay, maybe not, but at any rate, so this is a little bit better cutter than the Spanto probably is. That said, I mean, I'll admit that the Spanto did not slice like this, and frankly, this doesn't slice like this. The Sebenza is a much better slicer all around for sure, but I think it's important to remember where this knife came from and what its design philosophy was. Just the XM in general. Rick designed this knife from his experience as a firefighter, and he made it for people of that ilk, for firefighters and EMTs and paramedics and policemen and soldiers and people that were going to use it for a cutting tool, but also maybe for more than a cutting tool. Maybe they needed to pry open a car door or a manhole cover, lift a manhole cover, or what, I don't know. But he didn't make it, he didn't build it to be extremely thin behind the edge by design. I don't think that was necessarily his mindset when he made it. The XM-18's now been in production, I think, 10 years? Somewhere between 8 and 10 years. I can't remember, Bert, if you want to add some research, add that to your research list. And in many ways, this knife kind of pioneered, at least was one of the forefathers, if not, maybe not the ultimate forefather of the hard-use tactical folder, but it certainly was one of them that kind of pioneered that concept of a heavy overbuilt knife. Now, while the blade stock is certainly not thin on these, compared to what some knives in the hard use overbuilt category are today, the XM-18 is really not all that overbuilt. This is, frankly, it's almost it's a hard use heavy built knife, no doubt, but it's really almost more of a compared to some of your really ridiculously thick knives that have quarter-inch stock and whatnot. This is almost more of a medium built within that hard use category. I mean, there's ones that are built way more overbuilt than this. But that said, this was kind of one of those trendsetters knives. This was the knife that, and that's one of the reasons that it still enjoys the success that it does. When a lot of knives come and go, this one's been around for a long time, and that's because it was kind of one of the originals. It's kind of a classic, and it's an in production classic. And so it's just something to keep in mind when you're judging it against whether or not it's super thin behind the edge or the ultimate best slicer or whatever. For my EDC tasks and whatnot, it cuts well enough. It never fails to open mail or cut open a box or break down some cardboard or do whatever. That's really, and if I was, I'm not, but if I was a police officer or a soldier or whatever, I would certainly not feel like I was underknifed if I had this in my pocket. So let's understand that it's that it was designed and purpose built for to be a knife in a series of tools that a policeman or a paramedic or a fireman or a soldier would use, and in that regard, it's designed to be overbuilt and to be a little more fail-proof than your average knife. So with that comes a little bit of sacrifice, because you always have to compromise in some areas to capture, to gain in others. And if it sacrifices a little bit in thinness behind the edge and ultimate slicing ability, well, I guess in Rick's philosophy, that's okay. So it's okay with me too then. And frankly, I got a lot of knives that, this one in particular, just because I got it still sitting here on the bar top. A lot of knives that are really made to be slicers, and well, here, I'll show you another one. Oh, let's do. How about this? Here's a slicer. This thing's just made to be a slicer. These things just cut like crazy. This is a number 6 open L, the smallest you can get with this, with the collar, locking collar here. That thing's just a stone cold slicer. I mean, look how thin that is. That thing, just crazy slicer. Certainly not in the same category as an XM-18, but well, here's another one. That's just a crazy good slicer, and I've got a review on this one coming up too. This is an S110V Manix 2, full flat ground, just wicked slicer. So I have knives that can do that for sure. So it's just nice to have some variety and have some hard use stuff too. Not every knife has to be all the same to me. I kind of like the variety. So. And, as I was kind of saying in the beginning when I said I have kind of a hard time doing a review of the XM-18, one of the reasons I have a hard time with that is just because I have such a history with this knife, and I'm kind of nostalgic towards this knife because it was the kind of the knife that got me into the upper echelon of production knives. Because of that, I'm just not objective with this knife. It's just much the same way that I'm not objective with these cars. You might have gathered from Bert and the Trans Am that I always have out here, that I'm kind of a fan of these cars. I've owned several of these in my lifetime as well. One exactly like this, as a matter of fact, full size. Smoking the Bandit edition, special edition Trans Am with all the gold stripes and the gold bird in the hood. And when I owned it, it wasn't because it was the fastest car in the world or the most exotic car in the world or the best built car in the world or the easiest to drive car in the world. I had it because I just freaking digged it. same thing. I just freaking dig these. So it just hits that second kind of cool thing with me, and I make no apologies for it. I just like Hinderers, and that's just the way it's going to be. So this is less of a review and more of just a, hey, I'm talking about the knife. To the grind itself, the Skinner has this really cool blade shape, nice belly to it, a nice swale here on top that you can get your thumb onto, for up close work and whatnot. Nice finger choil here. Now I know, Rob, I know you're watching, buddy, and I saw your video where you're talking about how this thing just gets in the way. It doesn't bother me. It never has. Until you pointed out that it digs into your finger, I never noticed it. It doesn't force my finger up onto the cutting edge. It doesn't screw up the way I hold the knife. I can either hold it this way, no problem. It causes me no grief. I can hold it this way, no problem. It doesn't cause me any grief. If I put it right dead center on that knuckle, and just really, but I gotta be honest with you, that's not really a comfortable way to hold the knife, irrespective of this. I'm either going to come a little bit further around and get a good grip on it, or a little bit back off to get a little bit more of a precision grip on it. So I saw your point, Rob, when you were talking about that, but like I say, just honestly, it just never has bothered me. I don't consider that an issue at all. Now, if that was gone, I will concede that I bet yours feels really awesome right there. It probably has a really neat, clean feel to it, and there's absolutely no worries. And if it did bother you, then by all means. But I don't really feel it. So it's just never given me any trouble in any of my grips. I would rate the ergonomics of the Hinderer XM-18 as a 10 out of 10, with the flipper on it still, buddy. Without, I'm sure it's a 10 out of 10 too. So it's kind of a non-starter for me. I don't consider it a problem at all. But anyway, back to the blade. Sorry, I keep digressing here. Now you see why I've had so much trouble getting this done. I just have a lot to say about these knives, but I don't want to get. I have a hard time staying focused to get it done. Anyway, to the knife itself, or back to the blade shape here. Like I said, it's got a really cool swale, a little bit of a peak right here that kind of gives it kind of a harpoon look, especially with the way that they did the swedge right here. Just an all-around neat knife, blade shape. I did put a 18 degree per side wicked edge on it. If I can get the light to play correctly here, you can see a little bit there. It's very I love S35. It just takes such a nice polish. Let me see if I can get the light a little closer here. Maybe give me a little bit better play off of this. I want to wash the blade out, and that's the problem. I just have, this pub is just not the best place. There we go. Get a little reflection off of the tripod there. I love S35. It's got such a great, holds a great edge, but it also just takes a great polish. It's just easy to sharpen, relatively easy to sharpen, and Hinderers in particular is just I've always had good luck with it on the wicked edge. I'm gonna tell you one of the cuts that I had that I ended up having to stop in the middle of doing the video when I was trying to film one of the earlier ones a couple days ago was I took the knife out and I was talking about the blade and I was getting ready to show the edge, and I noticed all the edge was all gunked up, had a bunch of tape residue and stuff on it, and I'm like, what the heck? And I looked closer and it was just like, oh my gosh. I shut the video off, and my wife had taken this out of my Pelican case to use to open up a box that we'd got, that she bought this big storage rack off of Amazon.com, and while I was out running errands over the weekend, she grabbed a knife, just randomly picked a knife out of my Pelican case to open up this box, and this was the one she chose. She couldn't have chose this one, the Cryo 2. No. Couldn't have just randomly chose that one. She couldn't have chose that one I had earlier, the little Opinel. No, couldn't have randomly chose that one. She couldn't even chose this one. I actually bought her this knife for Christmas, hence the pink handle. Put a nice little edge on it, and nope. She didn't even pick that one. That's hers. So that pink sitting in my Pelican case stands out pretty good. That's her knife. I kind of bought it so she could use it for stuff like that. No, she randomly grabs the XM-18 and just starts ripping this box open with it. So not only was it all gunked up, but actually, and you can feel it right here, she must have hit a staple or something. This was a big heavy-duty box, and it was really well sealed, and I can feel a little nick right here just when I run my finger along here. I stropped it up after I noticed that, but there's still just a little tiny little nick right there. So it looks like things got an appointment with the Wicked Edge again, unfortunately. But you're right, just kind of funny. It's like, oh, stop, cut, try again. Anyway, XM-18. Like I said, I'm such a fan of these knives, and I am a fan of them being flippers. People say Hinderers don't flip. Bert referenced my how to flip a Hinderer video. That's not true. Does it look like it doesn't flip? Does it look like it's having a hard time flipping? I don't think it looks like it's having a hard time flipping, is it? The thing with Hinderers and their flipping ability that needs to be recognized is that, much like this car, they're designed old school, all right? This flipper is not designed, I'm not going to get into it again, reference my video. Flipper is not designed with bearings, and it's not designed to be a pull type, light switch type flipper, all right? If you light switch this, guess what? They don't flip. That's because it's not how they're built to flip. They're built to have tension in the pivot. They're built to be a preload or a push button. That's just how they're made. That's how they're supposed to work. People say, oh, I don't want to have to learn a special technique. Well, it's the kind of the original technique for a flipper. That's not a special technique. It's just the way that it's designed to work. In many ways, just to get back to this car, the real version of this, obviously, it's much like this. When I had this car, it was a 400 with a 4-speed, and it wasn't the easiest car to drive. The throw was long on the shifter, the clutch was heavy. Driving it around in rush hour traffic wasn't exactly easy, but it was awesome. The same time I owned this, mine was a 1977. The same time I owned my 77, I also owned a 1997 Trans Am, WS6 Ram Air, and it had a 6-speed in it, the Borg-Warner T56, and it was short throws, beautiful clutch, slick action, 6 speeds, just a joy to drive. And I could get in this car and then get out and get right into that car and get a real apples to apples comparison of those two, or actually really apples to oranges comparison, because the two cars were completely different. This one had the old Borg-Warner, Borg-Warner Super T10 in it. But you know what? If I could have either one of those two cars back, the 97 or the 77, all day, every day, a million times out of a million, I'd take this car back. Should never sold it, much like a lot of my knives. Anyway, and that's just because it's freaking cool. And driving that old car and working that old shifter is part of the charm of it. And to me, that's part of the charm of this. So if you don't buy this car and then bitch and moan about having to shift it. Don't buy this knife and then bitch and moan about having to flip it the way it's supposed to be flipped, I guess is my point. That said, in regards to that and the complaints that people have levied against the ranch, the Hinderer factory or shop over the years about soft detents, Hinderer has now increased their detent on these latest model Gen 4s in an effort to assuage some of those concerns about flipping. Well, I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter though. They're still not light switch flippers. Now, if I just really load up and really I can get it, but clearly that's not the way to do it. This is just a much better way to do it with that preload. So even though the detent is stiffer, they're still not light switch flippers. You still need to flip them like you're supposed to flip a Hinderer. So personally, in my opinion, anybody that tells you, oh, they've got a stronger detent so they're easier to flip now, I don't know. I don't necessarily believe, not in my experience, because I think it's a placebo effect. They feel that stronger detent, so they go, okay, now they flip better. I don't think so. As I've said in previous videos, that Gen 3 Spanto that I sold to get rid of this guy was a Gen 3, and it had an extremely weak detent. And it was one of the things that always did kind of bug me about it, not because it didn't flip well. That thing flipped as good or better than this one. It was the best flipper of all of them I've ever owned, and it was the weakest detent of all that I'd ever owned. The reason I didn't like the weak detent was just as a safety issue. It was easy to you could just do that and it would shake right out. I had it open in my pocket one time and slice open a pair of shorts. Never actually got me, thank goodness, but it did put a nice inch-long slice into a new pair of shorts that I had, so it was kind of a bummer. But the new detent, though, does make the knife safer, which I prefer. That said, and Rob went over this in his video, and I experienced the same thing with mine. The detent was almost too strong. I'll take it back. It wasn't almost too strong. It was too strong. When I first got this, I could not get it to deploy with the thumb hole, or excuse me, with the thumb stud, unless I just absolutely crushed it and made sure I wasn't pinching that lock bar, and I could get it. But I was like, man, that's really not good. And so now over the years, because I do like the flipper, I always have kind of opened Hinderers like this when I want to do it with a thumb stud. I just use the flipper as a trigger. It's just always what I have done because it's there. I go to open that. If I just want to open it slowly, I've always just done it that way. So it's not a big deal. That technique worked fine, but I just kind of knew it's like, that shouldn't be that stout, should it? So I disassembled the knife to kind of do my Hinderer Whisperer technique, where I take them apart and set them up exactly how I like them and lube them up with dye-free oil. Bert, if you want to go ahead and put a link to that video. And when I did that, when I had it apart, I bent the lock bar just a hair out this way, just relieved a little bit of that tension so that it would not have such strong detent. And now thumb stud is absolutely fine, and it can still mostly open it. You know, if you're really pinching it hard like that, you're gonna have a hard time. But if you can make sure don't have a hold of your lock bar there with the other hand, you know, you can mostly get it open like that. It's still not great like that. In many ways, it's a lot like this knife, the Zero Tolerance 0550. Opens much the same way, and kind of the same deal here. You know, that getting that thing open without just as slowly like that can be kind of a little bit difficult sometimes. So it has a real kind of a 0550 feel to it now. And Rob had commented on that too. It was funny. Me and him had not talked about that to my remembering. So it's kind of funny how we'd both reached that same conclusion. Review coming on this one as well. Toad Sticker is making me a custom scale for it, so I'm just waiting for that to show up before I put this one in on the bar top here. Anyway, so like Rob, and actually kind of the one that advised Rob to do it when he talked about the detent being so hard, but I had just gone ahead and bent that ever so slightly out that way, just to relieve just a hair of tension and to make it just all around easier knife to deploy with the thumb stud now. And I can get my thumb out of the way, just about hit the tripod there. And now it's much better action all around. It's not quite free dropping for me for whatever reason right now, so I may need to take it apart and whisper it one more time, because I had this set up where it was just smooth as butter and free drop, and I may have a little gunk in the pivot, I don't know, because it really wants to fall once I get it started, so I'm not sure. Just barely. It's just right on the razor's edge of being a free dropper. And I have had it set previously to where it free dropped, so I know it's capable of doing that. Right now it's just maybe has a little bit of stuff inside the pivot, tough to say. It does actually see quite a bit of pocket time, as you can see by here, so it may have a little bit of lint or something in there just clogging it just a hair. But it still has very nice action either way, and whether or not it just completely free drops, still is extremely smooth, so works regardless. You know, guys, Hinderer are so attainable now. Well, so is maybe a strong word, but they're so much more attainable now than they have ever been. There's more of them on the market now. Rick Hinderer is building a new facility. They're going to, I'm sure, amp up production with that, and he's got more models. You know, he's got all these different grinds now, and he's got the Eclipse out now, so he's got an additional model. He's got all the ZT stuff going on. So there's just the supply and demand of these, and just the general secondary market attitude towards these has softened over the last year or so. And if you ever wanted one of these, if you ever thought you wanted a Hinderer, man, now you got to jump on it now. I actually saw a 3-inch. I saw a 3-inch go for $420, I think, and that's $35 over the list price. That's pretty impressive, considering what they used to go for even a couple of years ago. So if you ever thought you wanted one, now's the time to get on board. Jump on board and grab one, whether it's a Skinner or a Spando slicer, a Warney, or the new buoy. If you think you want a Hinderer, boy, I don't know that you're going to get much better opportunity than now. It may go down a little bit more, and hey, you know what? Maybe it'll get to the point where they'll slip below when you can buy a used Hinderer for less than they cost new. That would be awesome in my book. I would like to get another one maybe someday if that was the case. But even that said, boy, they're much more affordable now than they ever were. So if you're thinking about getting in the game, if you're thinking about joining the herd, now is a good time to go ahead and take the leap. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Sorry it's so long. I guess I struggle to get these done because I just don't. I'm not objective about this knife, and I have a lot to say about it. At the same time, I kind of wander all over the place because I don't know. Like I said, it's just a nostalgic knife for me. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. That's 1 all 2 cents. Keep the change. Sláinte.